Imagine it's the spring of 1960 in the southwest of England. The nighttime air sits cool over the quiet roads near Chippenham, Wiltshire, and the local pubs have closed their doors, while most folks head home for a night's rest. There's a faint sense of calm, perhaps the usual Saturday night hush, after the weekend crowds have long dispersed. Then, on a dark stretch of asphalt called Roden Hill, headlights cut through the quiet. In the back of that taxi, Eddie Cochran, Gene Vincent, Sharon Shealy, and their local road manager for the week, Patrick Tompkins. They're in a hurry trying to make London's Heathrow Airport in time, because Eddie Cochran, rock and roll's bright young star, has a plane to catch that will take him back to California. Just hours earlier, he was finishing a run of shows at the Bristol Hippodrome, enthralling British audiences with the classic American rock sound they craved. He's got pressing business stateside, a recording session with producer Snuff Garrett, maybe even family gatherings. He might be gone for just a week or two, but there's also talk he'll soon return to England for more shows. The fans here have been so good to him, he can't wait to keep the momentum going. He's only 21, so everything in life feels like it's on the upswing. Then, in the blink of an eye, that smooth plan disintegrates. The taxi picks up speed. The driver takes a wrong turn somewhere near Chippenham, tries to correct course, and by the time they realize what's happening, it's too late. The car slams into a lamppost, spinning out at high velocity. No one in the back seat has a seatbelt, standard for that era. Eddie tries to shield Sharon Shealy with his body, the way someone does when survival instincts kick in, but he's flung upward, hitting the car's roof, sustaining massive injuries. Nearby residents are jolted awake by the crash. Calls go out, an ambulance arrives, the battered group is taken away in the small hours after midnight. By the next afternoon, April 17, 1960, Eddie Cochran has died. Rock and roll has lost one of its most promising voices. His star was already shining bright, but never again would fans in Britain or America see him step on stage with that orange Gretsch 6120 in hand. Now, more than 6 decades later, you can stand on Roden Hill in Chippenham and find a memorial marking the spot of that fatal crash. A small plaque and inscriptions pay tribute to a life that ended too soon. Locals still talk about the night Eddie Cochran's taxi skidded into the lamppost, how he was rushed first to a nearby hospital, then transferred to St. Martin's in Bath, where doctors did what they could. The heartbreak of losing him at 21 lingers. It's not just the tragedy of youth, but the sense of unfulfilled brilliance. People love to wonder, if Eddie had lived, how many more unstoppable hits would he have recorded? Would Summertime Blues have just been the beginning? Would Come On Everybody and Something Else have given birth to a discography rivaling Elvis or Buddy Holly's? Did we lose one of rock's greatest icons before he could even spread his wings? In late 1959 and early 1960, Eddie Cochran and Gene Vincent had been booked for a string of concerts around the UK, thanks to the efforts of promoters like Jack Good, who'd been producing Oh Boy and Boy Meets Girls TV shows, and Larry Parnes, the legendary British impresario who managed a stable of homegrown rockers, Billy Fury, Marty Wilde, Vince Eager, Tommy Steele. They wanted authentic American rock and rollers, so they invited Gene Vincent, known for Bebop-A-Lula, and eventually they persuaded Eddie Cochran to come over as well. Eddie, thrilled by the chance to cross the pond and meet the British fans who were devouring American rock records, arrived on January 10, 1960. The timing fit, because he'd just recorded fresh material like 3 Steps to Heaven and Cut Across Shorty on January 8th, and wanted to keep that creative energy high. His arrival triggered a wave of excitement. Eddie's records were charting well in Britain, sometimes even better than in America. Summertime Blues, co-written with his manager Jerry Capehart, had reached #1, 18 on the UK charts, but was deeply beloved among young Brits who gravitated to that breezy teenage rebellion vibe. Another big track, Come On Everybody, soared to number 1, 6 on the UK charts. In fact, on British soil, Eddie Cochran was arguably a bigger star than he was at home. People appreciated his swagger, his stinging guitar riffs, the rockabilly edge that still harnessed a pop-friendly melody. He'd also done cameo film appearances, like in The Girl Can't Help It, 1956, which introduced him to an even broader audience. He had that all-American rock star look, a quiff of hair, an easy grin, a distinct sense of style, and that unstoppable driving guitar tone. But behind the scenes, life had twists and turns for Eddie. Born in Albert Lea, Minnesota, on October 3rd, 1938, though some sources mistakenly said Oklahoma City, he grew up in a family that had moved from Oklahoma to Minnesota. His roots carried a bit of country music, a bit of Midwestern grit, and from a young age he was a gifted musician. In his mid-teens, he formed the Cochran brothers duo with Hank Cochran, no relation, but they used the brothers' identity to fit the times, and recorded a few country-leaning singles for the Echo label. That phase didn't take off, but it gave Eddie a foothold in the record business. When rockabilly started taking shape, Eddie realized he had a knack for blending that country approach with the new rebellious rock vibe. He also got an inroad to Liberty Records, forging a working relationship that shaped him into an emerging star. He had an unforgettable set of hits, 20 Flight Rock, immortalized by being the tune that impressed Paul McCartney so much he learned it to impress John Lennon, giving it an extraordinary place in Beatles lore. Summertime Blues, an anthem of teenage frustration. Something Else, co-written with his brother Bob and Sharon Shealy. Come On Everybody, urging fans to turn up the volume and let loose. He was even behind lesser-known gems like Cut Across Shorty, giving glimpses into a deeper artistry. Keep in mind, by the time of his death, he was only 21, so it's not like he had decades to hone his craft. Yet, he'd already left a lasting impression on rock music, bridging that sweet spot between raw rockabilly and a more mainstream pop rock sound. In 1957, Eddie embarked on some tours that shaped his circle of friends. He performed with Gene Vincent. They both toured Australia with Little Richard, and that was the start of a sporadic but enduring friendship. He also became close to the Everly brothers, especially Phil Everly, who introduced Eddie to a talented young songwriter named Sharon Shealy. Sharon had famously become the youngest female composer to top the U.S. charts when Ricky Nelson took her Poor Little Fool to number 1 in 1958. She was a formidable creative force, and soon her working relationship with Eddie blossomed into a romantic one. By 1960, Sharon was traveling with Eddie, writing songs with him, supporting him behind the scenes. Meanwhile, Gene Vincent, who'd soared to stardom in 1956 with Bebop-A-Lula and Blue Jean Bop, was in a more precarious position by 1959. His chart success had cooled, but British audiences still revered him. He was in talks with Jack Good and Larry Parnes to appear on British television and do some tours. That's how this combined Cochran-Vincent tour was born. They were booked at theaters across the country, Granada theaters, Hippodromes, Gaumonts, blowing the minds of teenagers who'd never seen real American rock and rollers up close. This was a time when British rock icons were still budding. The Beatles were just a young group in Liverpool, not yet discovered. So, Eddie and Gene offered a direct taste of stateside rock rebellion. They gave unstoppable rowdy performances. According to stories from fans, Eddie's guitar solos had a crisp ferocity, and Gene's voice still soared with that edgy warble. The duo, plus Sharon Shealy, hopped from city to city: Ipswich, Leeds, Glasgow, Liverpool, Bristol, And night after night, they left the crowd breathless. Things went so well that they extended the run into March and April. Then, with April halfway through, Eddie needed to return to California for that crucial Liberty recording session. He planned to dash home, cut some new tracks, maybe see his family, and come right back to join Gene Vincent for more British dates. The final Saturday show took place on April 16th at the Bristol Hippodrome. The crowd was electric. Eddie performed hits like Come On Everybody and Summertime Blues, while Gene delivered his classics. The Hippodrome was conveniently near the Bristol Royal Hotel, later becoming the Bristol Marriott, where they'd been staying. The building's facade is still there today, though the interior was extensively changed. So if you tried to find the exact room Eddie used, you'd be out of luck. All that remains is the shell of the original structure, plus the Palm Court Lounge. After the show, the group left from the Hippodrome's stage door. The driver that night was George Martin, no relation to the Beatles' producer. This George Martin was a local taxi driver who presumably had experience navigating the roads, but that night was chaotic. The main route from Bristol to London was the A4, a thoroughfare that ran through Bath, but late-night Bath traffic was notoriously bad, so Martin decided on a shortcut, possibly along the A420 route that bypasses Bath entirely. The plan might have saved time in theory, but as it turned out, confusion set in near Chippenham. The roads branched, the signs pointed in different directions, and Martin took a wrong turn. Realizing the mistake, he tried to correct it, likely speeding to make up lost time. The clock was inching toward midnight, and everyone wanted to get to London. As the taxi approached Roden Hill, something went horribly wrong. Martin lost control, the car bumped a curb, careened, and spun violently before striking a lamppost near what is now the Eddie Cochran Memorial. Gene Vincent and Sharon Shealy survived with injuries. Gene severely hurt his leg, an agony that plagued him for the rest of his life. Sharon had lesser injuries, but a major emotional shock. Patrick Tompkins also survived. Eddie Cochran took the brunt of the impact. He was thrown so forcefully that he sustained critical head injuries. He was rushed first to a local hospital in Chippenham, though details vary on whether that was the old Chippenham Cottage Hospital or the newer community hospital. In any case, the staff quickly realized he needed more advanced care and transferred him to St. Martin's Hospital in Bath. Despite all efforts, Eddie Cochran passed away at around 4:10 p.m. on April 17, 1960, never regaining consciousness. Today, if you visit St. Martin's Hospital in Bath, you can find a small memorial in the grounds acknowledging that Eddie Cochran died there. The hospital building was once part of an old Victorian-era workhouse with a chapel and a yard that once held the graves of the poor. Even though Eddie isn't buried there, fans installed a plaque that references his short life and timeless music. For decades, devotees have made pilgrimages to stand in that courtyard, read the words, and reflect on how ephemeral fame can be. That same sense of reflection can be found a short distance away in Chippenham, where you'll see the dedicated memorial plaque on Roden Hill, complete with lines referencing his only UK #1 posthumous hit, 3 Steps to Heaven, and the heartfelt tribute poem about how heavenly music filled the air that very tragic day. In the aftermath of Eddie's death, there were odd side stories. For instance, the policeman who secured Eddie's trademark orange Gretsch, 6120, was a young Dave Harmon, who would later become Dave D of Dave D, Dozy, Beaky, Mick, and Tish, a British pop rock group with numerous hits in the late 60s. It's surreal to imagine Dave D carefully carrying Eddie's guitar into the station as evidence or lost property. Meanwhile, the entire British rock scene went into mourning. The newspapers reported that rock star Eddie Cochran, beloved by UK teens, was gone. Many fans were left reeling that they'd only discovered him a short while before, and now he'd never perform live again. His impact on rock was massive, especially across the Atlantic. Paul McCartney has told the story of how 20 Flight Rock was what he played the day he met John Lennon. That performance signaled to John that Paul was worth having in his skiffle band. If not for Eddie Cochran's tune, perhaps the Lennon-McCartney partnership might not have kicked off so perfectly. British rock luminaries like The Who, the Rolling Stones, and T-Rex's Mark Bolan later cited Eddie as an influence. Even the glam rock set of the 1970s found something rebellious and timeless in his guitar-driven approach. Back in the U.S., though Eddie had hits, Summertime Blues soared to number 1, 8. He was overshadowed by bigger names like Elvis Presley or Buddy Holly. People recognized him, sure, but it wasn't the same level of mania he received in Britain. Over time, rock historians have reevaluated Eddie's significance, placing him in the same breath as Chuck Berry, Little Richard, Buddy Holly, and Jerry Lee Lewis. But in 1960, the American press mostly reported his death as a passing footnote, overshadowed by the wave of pop culture happening stateside. His single, 3 Steps to Heaven, released in the UK that spring, soared to number 1. Won posthumously, but ironically, it didn't even chart in America. That stark difference in reaction underscores how his British fans had truly adopted him. At the time of his passing, Eddie Cochran left behind an array of recordings on Liberty Records, some classic singles, some lesser-known B-sides. He was, by all accounts, excited about the next phase of his career, new songs in the pipeline, potential film roles, and a possibly bigger push from Liberty. He was also tight with Sharon Sheeley, not only romantically, but as a creative partnership. They planned more co-written material, a bigger presence in the budding teen idol sphere, and perhaps more touring around the globe. They'd even been talking about returning to the UK that spring or early summer for a second leg with Gene Vincent. The accident abruptly ended all those possibilities. Gene Vincent, of course, survived that crash, but was never the same. He suffered chronic pain in his leg, which had already been injured years before in a motorcycle accident. The trauma from this night deepened his emotional scars, fueling an even darker period in his life. He'd go on performing and recording, but the specter of that crash always loomed. Sharon Sheeley similarly carried mental and physical scars, returning to the U.S. to continue her songwriting career, though she later recounted the crash as a turning point in her life. The entire event cast a shadow, intensifying the sense that rock and roll's early heroes often lived on borrowed time. Buddy Holly had died the previous year in 1959, leaving fans raw from that heartbreak. Now, losing Eddie at age 21 felt like yet another blow to the budding rock generation. The next time you're near Bristol, you can walk from the old Marriott, once the Bristol Royal, to the Hippodrome in a matter of minutes, tracing the footsteps that Eddie, Gene, and Sharon took on that final day. The Hippodrome remains a working theater, so the next time you pass by, you might notice no major signage about Eddie Cochran's final UK performance, just the day-to-day bustle of a theater. Meanwhile, in Chippenham, they've commemorated him with a small street called Cochran Avenue near Roden Hill, part of a new housing development. Fans gather on anniversaries to place flowers near that memorial, reading the poetic lines about how heaven needed a guitarist, so the Creator summoned Eddie home. People also seek out St. Martin's Hospital in Bath to see the memorial plaque that references his short life and classic hits. The old hospital has changed over the decades, but the section where he passed still stands, connected to Victorian architecture, originally used for a workhouse. The hospital grounds hold unmarked graves from the 19th century, though Eddie was eventually returned to the U.S. for burial. The plaque in the courtyard states that he was 21, hailing from the U.S., a star who was returning to America to headline on the Ed Sullivan TV show. That claim might be questionable. There's no definitive proof he had an Ed Sullivan booking, though it's plausible a slot was in the works. He was definitely heading home for a recording session with Snuff Garrett at Liberty, which might have yielded more iconic tracks. There's also talk he missed his parents dearly and simply wanted to see them. Perhaps that was part of his hurry to get to London that night. He was longing for home, longing to bring new inspiration back from his British experiences. The idea that stardom was at his fingertips is undeniable. He'd been heralded as the next big thing in rock. Summertime Blues was still receiving radio airplay. Three Steps to Heaven was about to top the UK charts posthumously. It's one of those haunting final releases, a ballad now entwined with the day of his demise. Over the years, they've raised funds for plaques, memorial sundials, and so forth. In the grounds of St. Martin's, you can see a sundial from fans in Bristol, referencing Eddie's birth date and the moment he died. The guitar shape, the lines from his biggest hits, the references to how he was a country music star from 1953 to 1956, a Hollywood film star from 1956 to 1959, and then an American rock and roll star from 1956 to 1960. The layering is reminiscent of how swiftly he leapt from country to rock, from unknown to star, from living to a tragic footnote in rock's golden era. People reading these tributes might reflect that in under a decade, he soared from small Minnesota gigs to the big screen, from strumming country tunes with Hank Cochran to rocking out with Little Richard in Australia, from an early cameo in The Girl Can't Help It to a global phenomenon. It's mind-blowing to remember he wasn't even old enough to buy a drink in some places, that he was 21 at the time of his death was hammered home by the memorial. Some fans have read older references claiming he was 22 or 19, or that he was born in 1938 in Oklahoma City or 1938 in Minnesota. The confusion stems from record labels, press statements, and inaccuracies in early rock journalism. But the consensus now is October 3rd, 1938 in Albert Lea, Minnesota, making him 21 the day he died. The tragedy resonates stronger once you realize how young that truly is. He had the talent, the confidence, and the style. Who knows how legendary he could have become? On Monday, April 11, 1960, Eddie, Jean, and Sharon checked into the Bristol Royal Hotel, intending to do a one-week engagement at the Hippodrome. They performed daily or nightly shows there. Bristol is a city that straddles historical charm and new expansions, with the Hippodrome right near the city center, easy walking distance from the hotel. Sometime in the run of those shows, Eddie might have roamed the local shops picking up small souvenirs or meeting fans on the sidewalk. The city didn't realize it was hosting the tail end of a rock luminary's life. On Saturday, April 16th, they wrapped their final show, stepped out the stage door, and hopped into George Martin's taxi. The group had already checked out of the hotel, so they didn't even bother returning there. They set out from the Hippodrome's side exit, presumably carrying suitcases, instruments, and the iconic Gretsch guitar. Then, in the early hours of Sunday, April 17th, near midnight, the crash occurred. Some fans get chills reading or hearing that the next day was Easter Sunday, 1960, though that's not strictly accurate. Easter Sunday that year fell on April 17th, indeed. So, it was literally the holy day for many in the Christian tradition. This detail sometimes adds a macabre sense of significance to the tragedy. The news bulletins on Monday morning likely overshadowed the final mention that Eddie Cochran had died in a small English hospital, far from home. Meanwhile, his possessions, his guitar, clothes, personal items, were scattered on the road. A policeman named Dave Harmon picked up the Gretsch and took it to the police station. The guitar was eventually returned to the U.S., though the stories vary about whether that exact guitar ended up in a museum or personal collection. Dave Harmon, that policeman, later became Dave D., famous in the 1960s. It's one more surreal detail in the tapestry of Eddie's final chapter. In the immediate aftermath, the press covered the story with the typical brief headlines about rock star dies in car crash. Meanwhile, the outpouring of love from British fans was massive. DJ Brian Matthew on the BBC paid tribute, and the single 3 Steps to Heaven soared up the charts. If you read the lyrics, it's heartbreakingly ironic. Step 1, you find a girl to love. Step 2, she falls in love with you. Step 3, you kiss and hold her tightly. And that sure seems like heaven to me. The words etched on the Chippenham Memorial remind visitors of that joyful innocence. The track peaked at number 1 in the UK in June 1960, giving Eddie a posthumous top spot. The same track barely made a ripple stateside, a testament to how different the transatlantic tastes were. Over the decades, so many fellow rockers recognized him as an influence. The Beatles credited him for shaping Paul's early guitar strumming style and rebellious posture. The Rolling Stones gave nods, with Keith Richards once referencing Summertime Blues as a record that captured the teenage spirit. The Sex Pistols even drew a line back to the raw energy of 1950s rock, citing Eddie among the handful who first gave rock its aggressive edge. His guitarist approach used open strings, hammered riffs, chord stabs that cut through the typical constraints of the late 50s. It was also no secret that Eddie loved pushing the boundaries in the studio. Even though he was with us for a fleeting moment, he bequeathed a lasting lesson: rock's power to unite continents, bridging the distance between America and the UK, shaping future legends who owed some part of their spark to his example. Maybe that's the final step to heaven, the knowledge that an artist's best gift is the eternal resonance left behind, still glowing for anyone willing to listen.